Good there. We good to go? No mai haere mai. Welcome to the ordinary meeting of council this morning. Apologies, I believe we've got one for Peter McDonald. That's the only one I'm aware of. Would somebody like to move? Moved by Alan, seconded by Jeremy. All in favour will say aye. Aye. And look at this stage, I would just like to comment on the tragic loss of Graham Budd, and our condolences go out to his family and the staff. And look, can we'll just have a moment's silence in respect for his passing. And thank you for that. Are there any declarations of interest this morning? I haven't been made aware of any. So that takes us to item 4, which is public forums, petitions, deputations. And I understand we have the Helicopter Rescue Trust people on board. Public forum, there's one or two of you, will give you at least 10 minutes to present and up to 10 minutes for questions. So I guess that's the parameters. But look, the floor is yours. I'm not sure who's leading out, whether it's Graham or Martin, but welcome.
Good morning, everybody. It's Martin Dippy here. So, Graham, I think the floor is yours. Thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to present to the council. And I haven't seen Graham on screen yet, but I'll hand over to you, Graham.
I've just shared screen there. Are you seeing and hearing that okay?
You can hear me now?
Yep.
Okay.
And have you got the slides showing at the?
We can see the helicopters, yep.
Yes, lovely. Thank you.
Okay. Just to give you a very quick overview of the helicopter service that we provide from basically the Waitaki South coast to coast, including Stewart Island. We run a multiple fleet. We run a total of 4 helicopters that are fully dedicated, 3 in Dunedin and 1 in Queenstown. And I'll just quickly flick over to the next slide, please, Vivian. The main base is at Torrey Airport in Mosgiel. And it's run alongside a commercial operation that actually supports with the maintenance and extra machinery or extra helicopters when all the machines are out. So this was the only base in New Zealand that the government decided that they wanted to put in 3 fully dedicated machines. So there's 3 that are dedicated online 24/7, 365 days of the year at Torrey, and 1 in Queenstown. And it's the same level of service out of Queenstown now as what it is out of Dunedin. We have an obligation to be airborne within 10 minutes at day, 20 minutes at night. We average, our normal average time is getting airborne within about 5 minutes during the day. So that's very quick off the mark. Thanks. So this is a very quick shot of basically how the operation works, and the 3 helicopters you can see on the right hand side of the screen in the blue area pretty much cover that area. And then we've got one that covers the Queenstown one, which is covering the lakes area out to the west coast, and it does go into Fiordland and down to Te Anau and into Cargill. And then we've got Richard Hayes from Southern Lakes Helicopters based in Te Anau. That is as required. It's not a fully dedicated machine that's got paramedics sitting with the machine, but it's a very important piece to the whole link of the service to provide the service in every little corner, of our region. So it's nothing to say a Dunedin machine won't go into the deepest part of Fiordland or over to Haast and also the Queenstown machine. So depending on where the patient needs to go is where we go. Thanks for that. So we're multi-role. capability. We're primary, which is your road accidents and primary medicals. We're into hospital transfers. Now that's actually a very big deal. And it's a very big deal, particularly for Southland. We've got Dunedin Hospital right at our door, and we do all their retrievals, all their urgent retrievals are done by helicopter to Invercargill on a daily basis. In fact, we're right in the middle of doing one now to Invercargill, and where we go into Dunedin Hospital, land on the roof, pick up the intensive care team and go down, stabilise the patient in Invercargill or Gore Hospital, and then transport safely back to Dunedin. Or we might overshoot Dunedin and go to Christchurch, wherever the definitive care is. We do a small amount of search and rescue. Search and rescue is a very small part of actually what we actually do these days, because of the volume and the other. And then we also support the maritime service, which is of the fishing fleet that's down in the Great South Basin. So it's very important that we actually do that as well. So that's pretty much it, and everything else in between. Thanks for that. The service is pretty much covered with the legacy BK117s, and they all, they're all painted the same, so they all look very similar. And we took a legacy BK117, and the 850 stands for the horsepower of the engines, which they're normally a lot less. We did an upgrade in it to give us extra capabilities for the long game, and it gives us extra capabilities of carrying extra fuel to do these long offshore missions. We do the longest missions of any helicopter in New Zealand. If you go to the next screen, please, for me. And also I was setting up, because looking into the future, and we ended up putting these screens down, these 4 screens, the 2 on the right and the 2 on the left, and to give us a lot of extra capabilities. And this was in the early days, back in late 2004, 2005, and I'll come back to some of that, why we ended up doing that to where we are today. So next slide. And those screens, you probably say, well, my Navman and my car is very similar. Yes, it is, but this here is high level certified equipment. So it's got all the information there that we need on that particular screen, with wind speed, direction, all that type of stuff, moving map. Next one, please, for me. And it's got terrain awareness. So when we're in the middle of the night and up a dirty gully, it actually brings up the hills, and you can see the hills there in yellow and then turning to red. In 170 seconds, if we don't put an input in, we will hit those hills. So it's also telling us in our ear through our headsets, that we've got terrain. And so off that screen, you can see the altitude that we're at, you can see the airspeed that we're at, and so forth in the next screen. And then it's got these, what we call highway in the sky, which is these green boxes. So we put a low level route that we've got that goes in bad weather going out of Dunedin, that goes around through past Balclutha, past McNab, past Gore, down to Edendale and that, and out to Invercargill, and it'll set up a series of boxes all the way, and it's a matter of keeping the aircraft in those boxes the whole way. Some of the aircraft that we've got now have got autopilot, so it'll actually do it hands off. So that was the start of setting the foundation, and then I'll just jump forward a few years to the next slide. Oh, and also those traffic awareness systems. So it'll tell us any traffic that's in between 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock in the direction that we're going in. It'll tell us the height the traffic's at. It will tell us that it's above us and to avoid it. So it's very high level gear and to actually keep the crew safe and allow us to do a lot of extra work. So So a couple of years ago, and I'll come back and just talk about some of the other just in a minute. A couple of years ago, we looked at actually really upgrading the fleet to the very latest of what was available on the market. And there's another BK117 called a D2, or its trade name is an Airbus H145. It is the very latest of what's available in design. It's got a larger cabin, it's a wider cabin, it's a bigger cabin on the inside for the clinicians to work on. If you've got a very fragile ventilated patient that decides to have a cardiac arrest or needs chest drains put in, it will, we have got the room to work on the patient, but also it's a lot quieter on the outside. It's got a closed-in tail rotor, which we call a Fenestron tail rotor, but it's super, super smart. Like it will actually pull up an Invercargill or Gore outside the hospital at a 3-foot hover, hands off. It is that clever. In Germany, there's 53 helicopters on air ambulance in Germany. If you do not have one of these, you will not go to contract. And we're very fortunate we're very lucky to have been in a position to actually purchase one of these a couple of years ago. So that is really the helicopter of helicopters that you could actually wish for now. So it's enabled us to do a lot of other work. And just flick on to the next slide, please. This is this is in the cockpit in it. So it's got very similar to the other. It's got synthetic vision, so we see synthetically inside the cockpit exactly. And if you just bring up the next three slides. So when we're flying it, now we've just got these three screens that sit across it. And the one thing, if you have noticed, there's no instruments at all in the engine instruments or that the aircraft's that smart, we don't need them. And so that is the future, and that's what we've got now. If we lose an engine, we do nothing. The aircraft sorts it all out. Is that clever? Next slide, please. Back in 2005, I set up the first in New Zealand courses in New Zealand, which we bought CAA in. They had no rules at the time. The operators, Auckland and Wellington, Christchurch, Kiana, every operator that was in the EMS game, we run the very first course in New Zealand for the MVG goggles. That absolutely transformed how we ended up doing business. You can see on the left-hand screen there, that's a picture of the Clutha River and the Clutha Bridge. And if you cast your eye along the top, you'll see a bit of sky on the right-hand side. But you look down below, you can make out maybe a couple of lights. And that's normally what you would see on a dark night. So you can see, and that's a good night. So you can see the difference it's made. It's absolutely transformed how we've been able to do business. We've gone from doing less than 10% to well over 50% now of our work at night just because of that. And next slide. And we can see poles and structures on the left-hand screen. You can see the towers. On the right-hand screen, you'll see there's a little light in the middle. It was one of the paramedics I put out, and I was 1,000 foot above him with a cigarette lighter. And so it's actually taken the search out of search and rescue. It's absolutely transformed over the years of exactly how we've ended up doing that. So next slide, please. Like I mentioned, it is quite a lot over 50% at times now of our work is being done at night. But that was sort of part of the picture of where we needed to go to. And there was still times, particularly we get a dirty northeasterly that's coming here today, and we've got a hospital transfer, and I'm not just picking on Invercargill because of the audience, but because Invercargill has been extremely important. If we can't fly, you have to go by road, and we, and some of those outcomes for the patient can be absolutely detrimental to it. So there's two ways you fly. You fly VFR or IFR. The left-hand screen is VFR, visual reference, which is just you get your reference by looking on the outside. There's all your references, where on the right-hand screen is instrument flight rules, or IFR is sole reference to the instruments and the equipment inside the aircraft. And that was why we put some very sophisticated gear in the aircraft to allow us to do this. And we've already got it. So it was a step in the right direction. Next screen, please. So it allows us to IFR to fly with reference inside the aircraft on the instruments. And then, but it's got to be only on approved routes that are designed and approved, and for procedures for takeoff and landing. So you just can't go anywhere. So there's a lot of work that goes in the background, on that next screen. So this here is very quickly is a route that goes from Dunedin to Alexandra, and our normal route from there is 7,000 feet. And if there's freezing level, which is the red line, we're not allowed to go into that freezing level. We've got to stay below the freezing level. So that's 7,000 feet. And we've got a freezing level, say at 5,000 feet, we can't actually go IFR. This is flying along in the cloud. And so we've had these low-level routes designed, and one to Alexandra, and like we have to Invercargill, and this one to Alexandra, it keeps us down to 4,000 feet. So we can actually now go and do those jobs with a freezing level sitting lower, and it has absolutely transformed how we've been able to get care to the patient and the patient to the right destination. And to give you an idea, last December, 22% of the flights would not have happened unless we're IFR. Just shoot to the next slide, please. If you hop on an airline out of Dunedin or Invercargill, you will be on one of these high-level routes, and these are what the airlines all go on. So you blast off out of Dunedin or Invercargill, you go up and you sit in the cloud and you go to Auckland or wherever. You will be on one of these designed routes, but they're far too high. They're sort of 10,000 feet upwards. So we've put in this network of low-level routes that actually we've got going right through as far as Kaikoura, but in particular interest to us is Christchurch. And you can see there's a route that goes along the coast from Dunedin to Invercargill is 1,200 foot above sea level. Now, that is absolutely unheard of. We can be in the cloud in the middle of the night, and it'll take us now all the way to Stewart Island with an approach and departure into Stewart Island, and also that's just coming online in the next week. But Invercargill's been going now for the last 2 or 3 years, and I can tell you it has absolutely taken the risk out of it, and it has got us to get patients to where they need to go. We can go into Invercargill, pick up a patient there in really bad weather, and the next destination might be Christchurch for a clot retrieval, for example, where we couldn't do that before. And the outcome before, if we couldn't do it, is going to be very poor outcome for the patient. So you can see there's a whole network. If you just go, just back very quickly on the other one, there's a whole network. We've opened up all the valley systems through coming up the Clutha River to Balclutha Hospital, left into Gore Hospital, right into Tapanui Hospital, and continuing on to Lumsden, which is a vital point for us to link up Queenstown direct to Invercargill. So that work's just being done at the moment, and also on the other side from Alexandra to Wanaka. So we've got Alexandra, we've got Ranfurly, we've got Ranfurly, we've got Oamaru, Timaru, and into Twizel. Yeah, next slide, please. So with that, we've put a network of helipads in, and just for an example, yesterday, and people say, why do you need a helipad? We need a destination to go to, and from the helicopter point of view, I'd rather land on the ground, but when we arrive with a piece of equipment that's usually, if it's an incubator, it's 150 kilos. Yesterday, we took a patient north that was on the stretcher, was 215 kilos. So we need something that's really stable on a ventilated, very fragile patient with an intensive care team. We need something that's very stable, and that's the background of having the pads. The bottom left is the Q1, which gets used multiple. There's barely a day we're not there multiple times in a day. So they're all the same, and I'll leave it to Martin or Vivian to carry on. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham. I'm always impressed to hear of the service and how it's grown over the years. So talking about the growth and demand, since I've been on the trust 10 years, the growth has been quite astounding. Principally, we've kept on growing rescue operations, but also there's a lot of patient transfers now. So you can see on the screen there the number of patients that Graham and his team have moved through there. And I think a very important thing to note is 30% of the missions are out of Southland. And talking with Jules from the Lakes District Trust and with my head on with the Otago Trust on, we're very agnostic about where the patient lives or comes from. The most important thing is when a call comes through, either from an emergency call or a hospital transfer, it's our job just to ensure that the patient gets to the right hospital, the clinical pathway, as fast as they possibly can. Next slide, please, Vivian. So the funding pieces, I'll keep this quite simple. This has been a reasonably complex set of circumstances here. Principally, we're funded by, or the service is paid for by the Ministry of Health and the accident compensation. And they've been working together for a long time. There is a central government body called NASO, which is the National Ambulance Sector Office, that coordinates the funding. Over the years, the service has been a whole lot of localised services, and then in 2018, there's been a rejig of the contracts nationwide in order to bring the service up to nationally, the service up to a higher standard, and that's where HEMS New Zealand have come in, which effectively the powers to be, NASO said they wanted to have one contract for all of the South Island. So HEMS is a joint venture company between Helicopters Otago and Garden City Aviation in Christchurch that holds the rescue helicopter contract for all of South Island. At a trust level, as I explained before, there's the Otago Rescue Trust and the Lakes District Trust, which Jules Tapper has had a very, very long involvement with. And we are basically fund raising. So our Graham has got a contract to do obviously all the paramedic and aviation work, and it's our job to do the community funding. I stress that's not by choice. Many people would say this service should be funded nationally, by both Ministry of Health and ACC, but it's the central government's desire for it to be partly community funded. So that's been our role for many years, and although there are some people who pushing hard that it should be a central government funded thing, a little bit like hospices and possibly volunteer fire brigades, etc. At the moment, it does require community funding. So north of Christchurch, there's the Christchurch Trust, and there's also Nelson and the West Coast as well. So there's effectively 5 trusts that fundraise for the South Island. Lakes District, and that's their area, and Otago for our area. And the reason we're talking to you guys today is there has been a somewhat of a gap in Southland where we haven't got a formal trust, but obviously we all cover that area. So next slide, please, Vivian. So that's why we're on the call today, looking for a fair and equitable amount of community funding from Southland. I will hasten to add, over the years, we've had very strong support from the Southland communities. We've got some wonderful organisations that have been fundraising over the years, and Swede growing competitions and various different donations, but we haven't had a formal amount of funding from the district. And as the hospital transfers have grown, it's now it's factual that 30% of the flights come from Southland. So effectively, if in big numbers, if I say there's 600 that Otago provides, 300 that the Lakes District provides, I'll throw another 100 grand in for other equipment on average. Some years it can be significantly more than that, but what effectively the 2 trusts, we've got a target of trying to raise $1 million, which is very difficult. We don't have the corporate depth that we've got in other parts of New Zealand. So what we're looking for is to try and create some relationships with some ongoing funding from the Southland community that we can rely on, so that the service over the whole area is funded in a fair and equitable way. Next slide, please, Vivian. So many of you will know that the Otago Regional Council, we're very, very grateful for them. They've been a very long-term sponsor of our Otago Trust. So they've been our principal donor, and I've got the naming rights to the service since 2008. And they very generously provide $350,000 per annum, which we are very, very grateful for. In recent times, we've had some really, really generous donations from Southland funders for equipment and the various other different community groups I've already mentioned there. And so what we've got coming in cap in hand, ideally in the big picture, we're looking for $300,000 out of Southland area. And to me, it's a regional leadership thing of talking to both various the environment in Southland, the local councils, the licensing trust, other various different community fundraising groups to try and create that relationship where we've got an ongoing funding that we can rely on. Next slide, please, Vivian. So that's sort of my pitch around how that goes through. We can share a lot more information around the patient and where the flights originate from, but at a high level, that's the sort of the need. The service is amazing. We save tens of lives. It's been hundreds of lives over the years. And hats off to Graham and his team. They do provide an amazing service 24 hours a day, 7 days a week in whatever weather. And I think he should be really congratulated for the amount of the dedication and the professionalism that he's put into providing this essential service for our whole wider district.
Look, thanks for that, Mark. We are running out of time. I'd like to open it up for some questions. I think the two of you have given a very comprehensive case. So if you're happy with that, I'll ask for any questions. We might take the screen thing off at the moment so I can see everybody. Any questions of clarification from anybody? I'm looking at the screen. Eric. You're muted, Eric.
Yeah, thank you for your presentation, and the work that you do is certainly extremely valued and important. Have you approached other entities in Southland, or are you relying on Environment Southland to sort of be a promoter to try and gather together a support package, or where do we actually sit in your view as to the role that we should play in this?
Thanks, Eric. That's a wonderful question. So we have approached Southland. Pre-COVID has mucked up our approach to Southland. We had we flew a machine down to Invercargill and invited who we thought were all the key players for community funding in the Southland area to a presentation. I want to say it's going to be over 2 years ago now. Then we got COVID came along. So ideally today, to me, it's that regional leadership piece around saying we need someone to pick the ball up and run with it. I think there is a joint responsibility or an opportunity for various different groups in Southland to all work together. It's not really for us to say how the community wants to fund that, but we certainly would be lovely to get some progress made. It has to be fair and equitable, and I think we're going to keep on shaking the tin until we are reassured for the whole wider region that in actual fact that the funding is true and correct.
Lyndall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much for your comprehensive presentation. You've reminded me how much I want to be a helicopter pilot in another life, because it does, it appeals to me. And hot on the heels of watching First Responders last night, I'm hoping that some of your team feature in that program, because it seems to be a fundraising effort for those who are featuring. Just a couple of questions. Is there a reason you can give us for there not being a dedicated trust set up to do the fundraising that you alluded to as being in other parts of the country?
There's no specific reason. One of the things we've talked about is if we're not successful in creating some funding out of Southland, some enduring funding, then we possibly need to then hand it over and say we've tried hard, but we haven't made those connections. So we're very open to if the Southland community thought they needed to have their own community fundraising trust, that would be very helpful to, very, very open to that. So it's not a closed door point of view. We come in the spirit of working together, and there's an opportunity. Possibly we could have a trustee from Southland on our trust, and I can't speak for Jules on behalf of the Lakes District Trust, but we're very open to working with Southland in any way that we possibly can to ensure that we've got enduring, sustainable funding for the service.
Thanks, Martin. The other part of my question is how you think local government is best placed to provide that support for you, given that we are rate gatherers, and that if we support the trust in a financial way, then we are effectively rating all of our constituents to help with that support?
That's a slightly loaded question. I'll stay out of the politics of the whole thing. All of my commentary will be around the Otago Regional Council have found for a long time to be an enduring way, an appropriate way for them to help support the community. And interestingly, if I make the observation, if you live in a city, you probably don't need a rescue helicopter because you've got a land ambulance service there. So I think this is a service that particularly appeals to rural and regional communities and also to tourists, so which we don't have a lot of at the moment. But when we are busy, Graham and his team have plucked, whether it's car accidents or ski fields or mountains or off sea, etc. So I suppose it's trying to find an organisation that represents that group. And I suppose to me, it's one of these. It's an enigma that we are having to come cap in hand, asking for community funding. My preference personally would be that it should be centrally government funded, but that's not the case. So we're volunteer trustees. We are doing this because it's the right thing to do for the community. So I'll leave you to answer how.
No, and I think that's probably a good place to leave it. Look, I'd like to thank you all for coming in. I acknowledge Jules is also on the screen there now, and obviously we don't make a decision during public forum, but we will take on board the pitch we've had this morning and acknowledge the fantastic service that you provide to the people of the region. So
thank you very much for having us. I'm Vivian Seaton, the Secretary Manager for the Trust, and I can just see that Martin's obviously frozen there, so apologies, we lost him at the end, but thank you very much for the opportunity to present to you.
No, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move to item 5, which is the confirmation of minutes. And the first one up is the ordinary meeting of council for the 9th of March 2022. Would somebody like to
Move those.
move those? So we'll try to look around the screens.
I can see them.
I'll remove that. Mr. Chairman, I just noticed that it says that the meeting closed at 12:58 a.m., which is a blatant untruth. So I'm not normally nitpicking on minutes, but I spelling and stuff. But I just thought that maybe that should be PM.
The new Morris.
Yeah. So been moved and seconded. Any further corrections? If not, I'll
Can I ask a question, like a matter arising, and we can talk about those? Well, I just want to ask it. I had, in those minutes, Councillor Beard asked about 2 recreational bathing sites, which resulted in, we noted, were out of alignment. Staff undertook to investigate and respond following the meeting, so I'm yet to have that response.
We will note that and you will get a response. If there's nothing further, I'll put the motion. All in favour will say aye. Aye. Against, no, carried. We'll now move to the extraordinary meeting of the 30th of March 2022.
I'll move it.
Moved by Neville, around the screen, who's
I'll do that.
seconded by Lloyd. Any corrections, alterations for these minutes? It's fairly straightforward. If not, I will put the motion. All in favour will say aye. Aye. Against, no, carried. And the third was the extraordinary meeting of council on the 14th of April. Do we have a mover for that one?
Yeah, I can do that.
Moved by Lloyd, seconded by Alan. All over the place there, but I've got those two. Anything arising? If not, I will put the motion. All in favour will say aye. Aye. Against, no, carried. Right, we'll move to item 6, which is the adoption of committee resolutions. The first one up is the Organisational Performance and Audit Committee meeting of the 9th of March. Linda, would you like to comment on your meeting?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of things. Follows on from Councillor Bedd's comment, actually, that we've instituted a slightly different item in the agendas for OPAC now, and the Chair's report will provide follow-up progress and statements of answering of questions raised by councillors, so that we don't lose sight of some of those things as time goes on. The remainder of the resolutions were fairly standard, and in particular we noted the investment report. With that, I would like to move that they be accepted. Thanks.
Resolution's been moved by Lyndall, seconder for that. Jeremy. Nothing further, I'll put the resolution. All in favour will say aye, raise your hands. Against, no, carried. You can do the hand thing. The second is the Strategy and Policy Committee meeting of the 30th of March. Eric, would you like to comment on the meeting?
Yeah, very happy to move the adoption of the minutes. This was quite a lengthy meeting, and it was a good occasion when we were able to upgrade our knowledge on a lot of the activities that had taken place. And so we had some fairly fulsome reports, and I consider it a very good update. So happy to move.
Thanks, Eric. Second for that resolution. We'll take Bonnie. All in favour will say aye. Aye. Raise your hands. Against, no, carried. We'll move to item 7, which is the notification of extraordinary urgent business, supplementary reports or other. I haven't been made aware of any this morning. We'll move to item 8, questions. I think we dealt with, Lyndall, we had one, but I think it's different. We dealt with that, or do you want to? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm happy with the previous discussion.
Okay.
Chairman.
Not aware of any other questions. We'll move to Chairman's and Councillors' reports. I'm happy to answer any questions on the activities that I've attended. Just a brief comment. We had a couple of ministerial visits since the last meeting. It was good to host the Ministers O'Connor and Mika Viteri. They come across very well, very down to earth. I thought they were very good meetings. And also Kerry Allen, who I hadn't met before. I was very impressed with the way she does things. She listens, takes things on board. So it was very positive to have those 3 ministers in Southland, and they were certainly were listening, and I was very impressed with that.
I'll just make a comment on the Minister, Kerry Allen, Chairman, that there was an opportunity to her and her staff how Emergency Management Southland has been created as a partnership between all of the councils, which is probably one of the things that the legislation changes that have been proposed by the Minister are endeavouring to accomplish. So it was a really good opportunity to present ourselves and show the Minister that we can do it properly down here and we can fund it. We're not arguing amongst ourselves. It's working very smoothly, and it's been tested with 3 emergencies since it was set up 12 years ago.
Well, thanks for that, Neville. And she was listening, and it's not often we hear ministers acknowledging that local is often best coordinated, so that was quite encouraging. Do we have any, if there's no further questions on anything I've attended, I'll open it up to any councillors' reports. Lloyd Esler.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. As usual, just a brief State of the Nation report based on environmental issues I've seen during my peregrinations. Since the last meeting, I've been to Chatham Island, and I made the first discovery of myrtle rust there, which sort of gives us a bit of a warning of what's coming, because that's going to have implications for eucalyptus, manuka honey, and anyone who wants to try growing feijoas down here. and it's at Christchurch and spreading south, so that will be here at some stage. Up the Catlins coast, there's tourism everywhere over Easter. A little spot there, the Niagara Falls, obviously needs work, which is the Southern District Council project, but that's got huge potential. I've been to Stewart Island, and the drought's sort of more or less over. Ulva Island looking good. Up through the Hakataramia Valley, and an obvious wallaby problem, just talking to locals up there. I had a cousin who went out one night and shot 300 wallabies. So that is coming. They're over the Waitaki, and they will be, if they're not over the Clutha, they will be very shortly. Had a look at the Apua Dam and the water storage issue up there for South Canterbury, and perhaps a lesson there for the city in getting an additional water storage facility, perhaps in the Hokanui range somewhere. Looked at coastal erosion, so Colac Bay and Maui are showing erosion, but there's deposition on Arete Beach, so it comes and it goes. A lot of schools getting interested in environmental stuff and gearing up for the science fair and the social sciences fair, and also taking an interest in Matariki, which is a public holiday this year on the 24th of June. So, and I've been at Mount Hamilton for a wonderful view of the Te Anau Basin and the Eyre Mountains, and in fact half of Southern Province from up there. So that's my travellings. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I see Robert's indicating. Robert.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Just a question to Councillor Esler regarding his trip to Rekohu, the Chatham Islands, and Myrtle Rust. Is there any provision at the airport or wherever you fled from to check for spores of Myrtle Rust? And are you assured that you didn't take it to the island? That's a joke, look.
It was. I can assure you that it was already there. It was expected because it's downwind of New Zealand, and it's quite a large target. The presence of Myrtle Rust was not greeted with the horror that you might have expected, because the myrtle there is Chilean guava, which is a pest species, and this is looked on as a biological control. So it has good and bad aspects.
And just to follow up, I wonder if you checked your own myrtles in your own property, having been on the island.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I have a rama tree here, which is the most susceptible of all the species, and I do a weekly check on that, and it is not here yet.
Thank you.
Are there any other councillors wanting to report? I note Lyndall had a written one that was very good. If not, we'll move on to item 10, the staff report, and the first item up is the Chief Executive's report. Rob, would you like to comment on your comprehensive report?
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of things I'll highlight. And so noting that the organisation up until this week has been working remotely, we're now moving into working in two bubbles, so there are some staff in the building. So the work program's gone on. With staff working from home in the main. So yeah, my report covers a bit of the stuff going on nationally around what the regional sector is doing collectively, working with MFE on national matters. Interesting, we had a session with Tomato ROI at the last CE meeting, so it's the new water regulator, and Bill Bayfield was the interim CE there, talking about the importance of the organisation working with regional councils as the primary regulator for stormwater and wastewater, and noting Tomato ROI will have some jurisdiction in that space shortly. So he's looking to work with us closely as that unfolds, so there's no duplication. They'll be tending to be setting standards and relying on and requiring us, working with us to ensure they are being met. In the operational space, the ICM team is shaping up, working in catchments, as we've talked about. Pretty busy regulatory space. I note that the Southport hearing was held in person, I think, last week, and that's a good progress being made there. The compliance was good to see. slowly improving compliance rate for dairy shed effluent. So that's looking slow improvement every year. So it's good to see it up there. We're busy in the policy space around the court process and the strategy work, and in the corporate area, a lot of work going on in terms of the annual plan and delivering on that and supporting the organisation as it to actually perform its role. So happy to take any questions, Chair.
Well, I can see Robert indicating. I'm sure there'll be a few more.
Yeah,
Rob.
thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for that, Rob. Just a note about the Wilding Pine program. I noticed that it's been put on hold because of the roar. I wonder, is that documented anywhere as a valid reason to stop, a serious program like the Wilding Pine program just for the sake of hunters? And have I read that correctly?
Yes, so it's just a very temporary stop. It's a bit of a health and safety issue. Keeping our contractors safe is important, obviously, and so this is a very temporary issue for the month, 5 weeks period, 6 weeks period, and it's at the end of the season anyway, when they'll be doing control work, so it fits in.
Thank you.
Further questions? I'm sure there's Neville. So who have we got? Neville?
Thank you, Chairman. Just on page 42, there's a review of nutrient management and overseer. It says there that this is a redevelopment of overseer. Does that mean it still exists? Or have we got an entirely new measurement that can be applied?
Through your chair, so overseer still exists. Some gaps were highlighted in a review that was carried out a couple of years ago. Gaps, shortcomings, if you like, in terms of being able to actually be used the way it was being used. Some councils were using it in terms of setting targets and specific targets. We've never used it like that. We've used it in terms of the direction of travel. So there's a lot of work going on to make it, to bring it up to speed so it can be used and be relied on in a more robust way. It won't be relied on as the only tool, but it'll be one of the suite of tools that the councils can use going forward. So it will still be able to be used, but again, investments going on to sort out some of those shortcomings.
Thank you, Chairman.
Got Alan?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. So I just comment at this point on the section on the national matters and sort of page 41, 42. Get a little bit of understanding of if you can, on this portion, this paragraph. The ministries have proposed a departmental agency as an option to oversee implementation of the freshwater farm plan system, and then elaborate as to what a department agency is all about. So is this government policy, or is this consensus from within the CEs who attend these meetings? So just a little bit more elaboration on how that's proposing.
So I think what it says is that this is the government's thinking, and it's still being shaped up. I guess regional councils aren't going to be. We need to have some effective way of it being managed from a central government point of view. So whether that ends up being a central government department or not, we'll see, or whether it's part of MPI or somewhere else. So it's not the regional, it's not CE's view. The whole point of this is around here's some of the discussions going on at work. Does that answer your question?
Well, it certainly, I mean, I read through those sections and was quite alarmed really when the level of detail, again, centralisation of information that was looking to be established. As a comment from a farmer, we do a Department of Statistics information gathering exercise, and I think most farmers struggle with completing that on a reasonably timely basis. In fact, they probably wait for the second or third or fourth reminder from stats as before they'll finish it, even start it. Reading through this, I just see more heartache, I guess, coming from the rural community or farmers in particular, if they're going to be asked to again fill out some sort of central database information collecting exercise. So I was quite alarmed by the direction.
So the whole purpose, I guess, is so farm plans are a key tool, going forward in all regional councils. And so a couple of things, how do we collectively work together on, so there's consistency about that, that'll be required nationally around, so there's a similar plan required. There'll be obviously some regional differences. One size doesn't fit all, but there'll be regional differences in what the focus is. And there'll be some joined up data storage, so that we're not each developing data storage in each region. We can do that collectively at the same time, protect privacy. So this is all around making sure things are sensible and each of us is not reinventing, and it can align with what's required centrally as well. So this is trying to get some consistency and not remove duplication, not around putting in place another set of requirements. So if that makes sense.
Like you say, watch the space.
And, certainly the privacy thing is going to be an issue. It makes sense to have something that's reasonably consistent with regional flavour, but it's very much watch the space. So conversations are going on, but I don't think the regional secretary signed up to anything yet.
No,
at this stage. Yeah. Lloyd, you were indicating?
Yeah, I'm probably a little bit concerned of where that's going, because it looks like everybody's talking apart from the people on the ground that actually do this stuff, and you actually have all my information through consenting processes and other systems. So I'm not actually seeing the council role in here. I'll just make that comment. But I've got a couple of other comments. In the Waituna section, it talks about a large sediment containment area on the Waituna. I'm on that trust, but I don't know of any. Can somebody explain to me what that comment is?
We can come back to you on that.
Bottom of page 50. There's a large discussed sediment trap in the Waituna Creek.
I'm wondering if it's Waituna Creek, or whether it's we're aware of progress being made for a proof of concept.
Well, that's Currans Creek, it's the wetland, so that's not a sediment trap, and there is discussions going on around purchasing an educational trust that's sitting down there, but I'm not aware of any large-scale sediment trap in Waituna.
I'll through you, Chair, I'll double check that with Fiona, and if it is an error, I'll make a change. I'm not sure Fiona's on the call at the moment, but I'll come back.
Thank you. But the second question, Mr. Chairman, if I may, is that under the catchment operations, gravel management, in their workshop yesterday, one of the comments that came out was that the bridges are lacking capacity because of gravel build-up by some 2 metres. I'm wondering whether we need to look at gravel management and thoroughfare under our bridges in a bigger, wider scale, because that is a huge capacity issue, and this affects private property and people's lives and livelihoods. So I'm just wondering whether they were put in and built with a specific specifications, and have we actually maintained that specification over the lifespan of that bridge? And some of those bridges are 30, 40, 50 years old, and I'm wondering whether we need to make sure that we are continuing that capacity framework. And I don't think we are, if I understand the profiles correctly.
So through Chair, so these cross sections are going to give us that sort of information about how much gravel is there and how is it moving around. So that'll enable us to make decisions around the things we're talking about.
And it's good to see that conversation on global consensus is ongoing, because we know the situations where things aren't done in a timely manner. So I'm happy to see that still being progressed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Further questions?
I've got Lyndall, Eric.
Lyndall and David. Lyndall.
David's first.
David first. Okay, David, then Lyndall, then Eric.
Thanks, Lyndall. Yes, Mr. Chairman, just a question to Rob. Under the freshwater farm plan update, I see the sector's going to participate in active collaboration workshops, farmers, industry groups, environmental CGOs, agricultural professionals over the next few weeks to seek feedback. I just wondered why Taonga Whenua was the engagement there as a separate workshop looking across the whole farm plan process. Just a bit of an explanation there, because obviously at some stage I would imagine all of those groups need to actually engage to make sure everybody's heading in the same direction, or certainly their aspirations. So just a query around that. Thanks.
Yes, so I think that's very much the point of these discussions, is getting their feedback, Councillor. Is that what you meant?
Yes, I just wondered, Taonga Whenua, just the fact that it's a separate workshop.
Well, in terms of actually ensuring that there's an understanding of their cultural perspectives, and which are going to be part of the farm plans as prescribed by MEV and MPI. So just to actually ensure there's a common understanding of what those requirements are, those perspectives are. And how they
I just thought for the rest of the farming community or the agriculture sector need to be aware of those aspirations too. So I just wonder whether it's probably better sooner than later.
So
there's actually a consultation program going on with everybody, and a separate consultation with iwi. And I don't know, like David, where these meetings are and how they're going to touch the community. And I don't see a council, as I said before, I don't see a council interaction with that. Are we part of it? Are we alongside it? Are we going to have attendees there? That's not clear.
So this item is written from a national perspective. I'm not sure these workshops are even happening in South. These are looking at it from a regional perspective, getting how best to shape these up going forward. It's not a separate consultation as a work stream, where actually, so the people undertaking the consultation have an understanding around cultural perspective, so they can then talk at these workshops with industry. So everyone has a common understanding, everyone's hearing the same story. So it's not consultation, it's a work stream. We are involved, Taonga Whenua are involved in the preparation of the policy work. In terms of how it's been rolled out, there's consultation going on as to getting feedback from the community on those. So this is, it's probably a bit of detail that in hindsight probably is not that useful, because this is just giving you a sense of here's how things are progressing nationally.
And I noted in the report there's talk about our land size people working with catchment group and greater catchment. People working with people who've already got a farm plan up and running. Obviously, you've got Thriving South and a whole lot of organisations from Dairy NZ, Beef and Lamb have these conversations, because we know this is going to be they're going to be living documents. I'll start off with a few basic things in place and adding everything on, and probably including health and safety in the long term. It's about getting started. And it also talks about the nitrogen cap. Obviously, the farm plan is a fairly obvious way of actually validating that sort of stuff. But it's not. It's going to take time, but we need to have in Southland we need to come up with a consistent approach really, and have all the organisations in the same room, so that we actually are all going down the same track really.
So, through Chief, just following on, MFE are really clear in our conversations that there's going to be needs to be a regional approach to this, a regional flavour to this. So we've got some national standards, and there's some scope for some regional flavour, and our Landsus team and our integrated catchment management will be working with communities to shape up how do they use our existing farm plans and put them in this process and avoid any whole of duplication and the sort of things Councillor Baird talked about, another plan, it's something separate. So how do we bring it all together?
Lyndall.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I've got 3 quick questions, if I may ask them all in sequence.
Okay.
Firstly, page 48, just wondering, seeking clarification on what the LAWA request for new estuarine topic actually means, please?
We can, through you, Chair, we can come back to you on that, that bit of detail.
Thank you. And on the next page, page 49, am I allowed to ask what the new to region plant is that's mentioned in the incursion report, or is that a trade secret?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I can answer that if that's right. It is called figwort. It's only been found a couple of times in New Zealand. It's not known to be much of a pest, but it is growing massively and far, far bigger than anyone would expect. So we're just doing a bit of a risk assessment to see if it's something we need to seriously consider doing something about, or whether we just watch and wait and see what happens.
Great, thank you. And Ellie, also to you, actually, the Environmental Enhancement Fund, this was a new way of doing things this time. So I'm just wondering whether we were oversubscribed and had to allocate, or how it went.
From my understanding from what the staff have said, it's gone really, really well. We've had lots of applications. They didn't all meet the criteria. So some of them have been turned down. And we did go back out and get some more applications in. So as far as I'm aware, all of the money has been allocated. And we've just opened up the round for next year. So it's going really well, and we're getting lots of really good projects.
Thank you very much. That's me.
Thanks, Lyndall. Eric.
My points have been partially raised by Councillor Beard. In the 18th of April Farmers Weekly, there's an article that states the government is putting $25 million into funding a new farm advisor scheme. And when I read this comment on page 42, firstly, my blood pressure went up a bit when I read the article in the Farmers Weekly, given that the government doesn't think I know what I'm doing or know where to go to get information if I actually need it. But quite separately, the article does state that it's about one of the objectives doing farm plans. So I note there in your comments, Rob, you say that there will be consultation over the next few weeks. For me, I think there's a number of questions that actually need to be asked. There's no Department of Agriculture to actually absorb these people as there was in the 60s and 70s. Is there some expectation that we're going to be employing some of these $25 million invested farm advisors to do farm plans, given that we seem to get things landed on us from national policy statements and government policy on a reasonably regular basis? I think we need to know now, if we're going to contain ourselves to an expenditure increases of around 5%, just what part of the game we're expected to play in this. Councillors just might want to have a read of that article online and see if they are as aroused as I was about what this actually means.
Through your Chair, the farm advisories, the proposal to set up a farm advisory system is that there are a series of pilots, as I understand, 4 pilots. One of them are here in Southland. And that's about as far as I know. They are separate to us. They will be around, using the old farm advisory service as a bit of a model, but what does it look like in, 2022? So they'll be working, I think it's maybe part of a regional presence that the MPI may be looking at, but I haven't seen any detail on that yet.
And I'm assuming that Thriving Southland, some of the work that's going on in Aparima is possibly part of that, Rob, or is that separate again?
I think it's separate again, and I think it's a watch the space and we'll see what's next. We're not clear.
I'm aware there's a whole lot of people getting themselves set up to be experts in this field, and I guess one of our concerns all along has been if the individual landowner doesn't have skin in the game, they won't achieve what we want them to be. We don't want a health and safety thing that sits on the shelf and you've ticked the box. We actually want, these have actually got to be a tool that you use. So on a daily or weekly basis if it's going to achieve what it's supposed to.
In my understanding, these positions aren't there to do farm environment plans. They work with farmers around production, and how to get the best out of their land in a sustainable way. So there's some overlap, there's some grey areas we need to be real clear on this. And so this is very recent. The Minister's very clear that he's quite keen to invest more in this space.
Have we missed anybody in the questions there at the moment?
I'm having a second dip, if that's all right, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Alan.
So I've got three sort of reasonably quick ones this time. So I'm just asking really on the science and informatics, really on how the monitoring of periphyton's gone over the summer period, and in light of that we've had really low flows through particularly the Upper Rima and the Ariti. How have periphyton levels been through that period? Because obviously with low flow and concerns over nutrient, has there been a correlation, or is there any link to how that monitoring's gone? I also was asking the question on air quality on page 54. We talked about an air quality, the regional air plan. Maybe we're looking to review the regional air plan. A lot of the pollution calls, 49% of them seem to be in relation to air quality matters. So I know we've got plenty on our plate, but I'm just looking today as to when we might be looking at reviewing that regional air quality plan. And finally, in the Southland Times, there was a story there on the 8th of the 4th regarding Real New Zealand and the moorings in Fiordland, and I've had some inquiries over how that is progressing. So all I can really ask, I know it's not much, but what is the statutory timeframe for the council to complete its investigations and make a decision on any further action?
So I'll hand over to Wilma to talk about the science informatics, and I'll answer the Real Journeys one initially. I think that I can come back to you with a statutory timeframe. I think it's 6 months. Let me come back on that. So the investigation's underway as to what action should be taken. And hand over to Wilma for the science informatics one around the periphyton. And I suspect we might need to come back to that.
I will be very happy to come back to the council if I can't answer on that one, but I would like to talk to John about that first.
And the other finally was the air quality, whether the regional air plan is any movement on that.
So we're still tracking to get the work done this year on the review, and that's our intention. And I am hopeful that we will at least have the planning part of that within this year's LTP.
Lloyd.
Yeah, just two quick questions. Under harbour management, I wasn't aware that our regional marine oil spill contingency plan was being reviewed, and we've had no workshops on it that I'm aware of or that I attended. So I thought we would have had some sort of oversight on that.
And through you, Chair, I think Lyndon is online.
Lyndon, are you able to answer that one? And noting that this is funded by Maritime New Zealand, and so they fund a lot of our oil spill responses. But Lyndon, over to you.
If I just add for clarity, the reason I'm interested is that we all expect that our oil spills are in the sea and we're containing it there. But we've also had one inland oil spill that we got some grief over. And while I understand that you're going to bring New Zealand for approval, it would have been nice, in my view, to have actually had some sort of understanding of what our capacity in this field, really. And especially when you're talking about something happening in Fiordland, the cruise ships do come back and the ships are getting bigger. So that was my interest in that one.
So Lyndon.
Through you, Mr. Chair, sorry, there's only one Lyndall, there's one Lyndon. Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, the regional oil spill, marine oil spill contingency plan is a council document, but is a plan, but there is a requirement from Maritime New Zealand that we conduct a 3-yearly review on that plan. So that is part of the delegated authority that's given through to Robin, and who has subsequently passed that delegation on through to me. And that's just for the marine space. Whereas freshwater is handled by the compliance team. But in saying that, if there are any oil spills in the freshwater space that have the potential to reach the marine environment, then obviously we cover that as Regional 1 Team Commander.
So it would be appropriate, I think, just to have a sort of briefly highlight in the workshop, just the review within, and just keep councillors in the loop. Would be a useful thing to.
Sure, no problem. We can organise that.
And my last question, Mr. Chairman, if I may, is there's a comment there at the bottom of page 58 that's referring to the planning of the building refurbishment continues, and there is a suggestion there that future staff capacity and forecasting of whether we use our current building or other buildings. I've seen some early work on this, but I'm not sure where we are as a council on this particular piece of work right now. I understand there's a part of our building that has not been upgraded and that needs an upgrade. I agree with that, but I'm not sure of the scope of whether we're going to go up, expand, or common workplaces, or the machine area.
So again, this is through Chair. This is another item we can workshop. Just give you our things is being developed. It'd be fair to say, so we can come and we can share that with you at a workshop very shortly.
Yeah, just a question on the LiDAR capture process. Good to see that's going on. Now I'm assuming that it's the Mataura work that's been prioritised and that's was to be completed by mid-April. There still looks to be some gaps on the map. Am I correct that we've still got a little way to go before we get the entire province mapped?
Through Chair, Paul, are you able to answer that?
Yeah, you're correct. The Mataura stuff has been prioritised, but I think we're getting close to a completion date. So I might take the liberty of coming back to you, Chair, with that. Lucy might actually. Are you signalling, Lucy?
I can chime in, Chair, and just add to what Paul's stated, if that would be helpful. He's correct in the fact that the Mataura was prioritised more recently, but in terms of the wider PGF funding, we're at almost 70% completion for the province, and they're heading into the data testing and ground truthing phase for that 70% that's been flown. It was always intended to be a 3-year project, so they've had a really good run in the last few months in terms of good weather, which has enabled them to fly more than what they were predicting. So we're ahead of deliverables where we thought we would be. I'm happy to provide more of a detailed update, though. I think we were tentatively talking about a workshop in May on LiDAR, and so happy to do so, or to bring an item back to strategy and policy if that would be helpful.
Thanks, Lucy. I think that would be. It's an exciting project, and it's going to give us some pretty specific tools that we haven't had before. Have I missed anybody on the Neville? Yeah.
Thanks, Chairman. One's a question and a request. Just page 49, checking for fish in the river. What's fish fix? So we've got, I think, 55 fish fixes. What's the fix?
We could ask Ellie to expand on that one, Chair.
Yeah.
Well, I'm counting, but I'll over to you, Ellie.
So apologies, the title for that should be Fish Passage Remediation. So that's part of our fish remediation project. So it's the barriers, putting in ropes and ladders and things to make it easier for the fish to get through the culverts. So yeah, apologies for that. That's my bad typing.
Thank you. The request, Chairman, there's a number of topics that have come up as a result of questions here where council are going to get back to councillors now. Quite often that goes back to the individual councillor. I'd just like those things to be shared with all of us, please. If they come back as an email.
It's good. Nobody further? Are you going to move the recommendation? Seconder.
Second.
Neville. All in favour will say aye, raise your hand. Okay, we'll move to item 2, which is remuneration for Mana Whenua representatives. When would you like to lead into any comments on the?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. There had been a resolution some time ago by council in relation to remuneration for Mana Whenua representatives. And the purpose of this paper is to bring an update to that. It was quite outdated. So we've looked at the way that remuneration has happened in other councils for similar standing committees and have proposed the same formula that is being used by Otago Regional Council. And we have brought this paper to you for your approval on that basis.
Thanks for that. Are there any questions on that report?
Can I just ask a question before
Alan?
It's just a clarification, Mr. Chair. So if we've already advanced the money across to Te Marama for this purpose, how are we really going to track or be sure that that is the level of remuneration that they will receive? And or do we even need to be involved in what that level of remuneration needs to be?
No, we haven't advanced the money to Tom yet.
Didn't I understand that we've agreed in the annual plan to advance Te Marama some additional money than they've had in prior years, and that would be covered?
Yes, but the funding that we agreed to was an increase in their pūtea across the board. Specifically, this is the funding for these standing committees, and the rest of the remuneration that you voted as an increase for the long-term plan relates to the work that's done by Te Marama staff to support those members and to members that are coming to other events. So if we're inviting them, we have a lot of operational meetings that Te Marama come to now for governance, and also to other workshops. So these are the standing committees because we want the optics of this to be clear. So all of that is a budget that Te Marama have worked through, but we needed to remunerate these councillors, these representatives specifically for these.
So just clarifying again, so that money is in the existing budget that we've got. We're just detailing it.
It's within the existing pūtea, but it's specifically for this purpose and specifically to these individuals.
And they will pay.
Yes, they will. They will.
But my understanding here in that last paragraph is that the money proposed will be that Te Marama will be paying the Mana Whenua representatives directly from the governance funding provided through the long-term plan.
Yes, they will, but they've agreed that this is the pūtea for these committee meetings.
And I think, you've got ORC who've come up with a proportional payment. That's when we're talking about Ngāi Tahu again, that's a good example. I think it also talks about ICC being slightly different because you've got a whole of council committees, which changes things again. So I think this is probably a good place to start, that it's proportional. This may change over time, but it's something that needs to be put in place. And the recommendation is it's not just remuneration; it's about the voting rights. It's just tidying up.
So can I just be clear to the councillors that we do pay Te Marama their entire pūtea on an annual basis, but it includes a range of different pieces of work, and it's no different to that. So when we fund to work on the coastal plan for their staff, that's part of that total package as well, but there are specific line items within that. So this is exactly the same way that we remunerate them for all of them.
On the recommendations, Chairman, to note the report and to note the change to the council standing orders from their resolution in February.
Moved by Neville. Lyndall, did I miss you before we? Okay. So we had a mover. So Eric, were you seconding or speaking? You're muted.
Yeah, no, look, I just had a question which was very much secondary. at our last meeting, when we got to publicly excluded, we asked our tangata whenua reps to go, and I think we need to resolve that if we haven't done that. So what does the status actually mean in terms of the wider thing, which includes publicly excluded? I think if we haven't got that resolved, we need to.
I think it's a good point, Eric, and I guess even in public excluded, we can actually invite, as we often do with staff, to remain. But I guess that's something what staff to perhaps come back to us on.
The council. Sorry, the appointees are members of the committees. They attend all. The only time we asked the members to leave was when they were there as observers before they had been officially appointed. So they have attended all public excluded sessions. They get all the papers that all the councillors get, are treated equally as councillors. Thank you.
That covers that one. So we've had a motion moved. Lyndall, did I see you indicating or not on that one? You didn't. Okay, I seconded for the resolution. That's Jeremy. And if there's no further discussion, I will put the resolution. All those in favour will say aye and raise their hands. Aye. Against, no, carried. Right, we'll move to item 3, which is the appointment of acting chief executive.
Just for matter of clarity, is it appropriate that Wilma stays while we discuss this section because she is named in the report?
We're having a conversation with the public.
We're still in public session.
Sorry, public. No difference.
We're happy with that. It's reasonably self-explanatory. You want to comment on that?
Just as per the report, I've tendered my resignation. I finish next Friday. Time flies, doesn't it, around? And so the recruitment process is still underway for my replacement. So what we're proposing is to appoint Wilma Faulkner as the acting CE while that process is underway.
I'll move the recommendations.
Moved by Neville. I'll second that recommendation. And look, I just want to acknowledge that if Rob had continued to the end of his tenure, it would have been right on the election, and I know he's wanted to leave this organisation in a good place, and I thank him for that. We will have some sort of function before you leave, Rob, but I know you've had the future of this organisation in your mind with your decision, and we'll have a few other opportunities to wish you well for your future life outside councils. And we all know these jobs take tolls on families, and you might be able to take up golf. I don't know. But that was moved and seconded. I will put the motion. All in favour will say aye. Aye. Raise your hands. Against? No. Carried. Right, we'll move to item 4, which is the Agresta Delegate Authority to Strategy and Policy Committee, the power to consult, page 64.
Chair, this is just because of timing of when council meetings are, and there is every possibility following our workshop next week that we may need to make some decisions to consult in relation to the RPS. And so as it happens in the space between this council meeting and the one in June, we are asking for you to give the Strategy and Policy Committee the power to make that decision should that be necessary.
Mr. Chairman, this is quite mechanical. We've been through this process to make sure that we hit timelines, and I see this is just a follow-up of that process.
Moved by Lloyd, seconded by Neville. Any further discussion? If not, I will put the motion. All in favour will say aye. Raise your hands. Aye. Against? No. Carried. Right, we move to item 5, which is the Local Government New Zealand's annual general meeting and remit process.
And we've received advice this year that the Local Government New Zealand annual meeting is being held separately from the conference, and it is being held in digital format only. Zoom link, so it will not be an in-person meeting. But for all that, the same process still applies for the submission of any remits if council wishes to lodge remits. You need to go through a local zone meeting first, and this item is put up every year, gives the council an opportunity to lodge in remits. I'm not conscious of any, but just in case you wish to.
Right, so in the past, I haven't been aware of us actually putting up a remit. They tend to be more territorial focused. When we want changes, it tends to come more through the regional sector, but if anybody has any burning remits, I certainly haven't been made aware of any in the run-up to it. And this is quite different. It's normally part of the conference. The timing must be similar, is it, Jan? I'm just...
It's 28th of July, so the conference is in July. It's a week later.
So it is different, okay. Now that's all good. So we are noting the report, advising any matters. So I guess at this stage, unless anything's been raised, noting the report is probably sufficient.
I'll move that, Mr. Chairman.
Moved by Alan, seconded by... Who was that?
Bonnie.
Okay. All in favour, I'll put the motion, all in favour will say aye, raise your hands. Right, we'll move to item 6, which is Local Government New Zealand's Zone 5 and 6 meeting.
And since this item was prepared a few weeks ago, there have been a number of changes. So the Local Government New Zealand are now proposing to have an online Zone 5-6 meeting on the 9th of May only. And that will be a meeting at which, if there are any remits to be considered, they would go through that meeting. There will also be a possible in-person meeting on the 20th and 21st of June, or the 18th and 19th of August. And they've actually got a poll out at the moment asking if we're interested in either of those. So the meeting that this item related to specifically on the 13th of June is not proceeding. So if you wish to have people attend the online meeting, you could, last time we just circulated it to everybody, so anybody could participate if they wish. And once they settle on the other meeting dates, we'll put a formal report up.
So this is different from item 6 that we're...
This is item 6.
It is item 6, okay. Because it was a little bit confusing. We were talking about Dunedin, then talking about Balclutha. So at this stage it's the 9th of...
It's the 9th of May, Zoom only.
Zoom only, okay.
Is it necessary to appoint anybody to, there'd be no voting? If it was voting, we would have to appoint a delegate.
Probably a good point, because they may vote on remits, for instance.
I think we can appoint the chairman and one other councillor as delegates for that Zoom meeting, I would suggest. So that if there is a vote, then we can take part in it.
We had a discussion earlier, and Neville, Lyndall and South, when we thought it was going to be face to face, we were indicating we could probably put the 3 down. I'm not sure whether we get 2 votes or 3 votes, but at least we have one as an alternate. Well, I'm happy to move that actually the 3 of us are appointed as delegates, but that doesn't stop anybody else going online. And have we got a seconder for that? Seconded by Lloyd. All in favour say aye. Raise your hands. So the next item is item 7, which is the Local Government Annual General Conference and Regional Sector Group Pre-Conference Tour.
This year, the annual conference is scheduled to be in Palmerston North from the 20th to the 22nd of July, and there's going to be a regional sector pre-conference tour jointly hosted by Horizons and Waikato Regional Councils prior to that meeting. There is a detailed program for the conference available on the website. I'll put the link in to that. It's into the agenda. It was quite a lengthy program, so I didn't attend it. And conference registration costs are approximately $1,400 per person. And they've given an indicative cost for the attendance of the pre-conference tour of $950 to $1,100 per person. So we're asking for the appointment of delegates to conference and or to the pre-conference tour.
We did have a conversation earlier, and I think Ellen was indicating, and possibly Lyndall, and myself. Is there anybody else who would be interested in either of those functions? In some ways, if the annual meeting's not there and the regional sector meeting's not part of the main conference, I'd be happy for somebody to experience the conference and I'd just do the first bit, but we don't know that yet. But at this stage, we've had 2 indications. Anybody else that doesn't appear to be? Would somebody like to move those?
I'll move your recommendations, Jim.
Second.
Moved by Neville, seconded by Jeremy. Those be the 3 delegates. All in favour will say aye. Raise your hands.
Aye.
Against, no. Carried. Okay, we will move to item 8, which is update to the staff delegation manual.
And this update is just a change to reflect recent job title changes within the compliance division. So just the people have remained in the roles, they've just had title changes, so it's a
Too straightforward.
I'm happy to move that, Mr. Chairman.
Moved by Lloyd, seconded by Lyndall. All in favour say aye, raise your hands.
Aye.
Move to item 9, which is the councillors' meeting schedule.
So there've been a number of changes to this meeting schedule since it was set up. So the additions that I'm aware of are the Bluff Maritime Museum Trust Board meeting on the 11th of April, attended by Councillors Cock and Esler. The Southland Civil Defence Emergency Management Group meeting with Minister Allen here in Invercargill on the 11th of April, attended by the Chairman and Councillor Cock. On the 27th of April, this afternoon, there will be a climate change workshop for those councillors that indicated their availability. On the 3rd of May, there's an Environmental Challenges Hui presentation to the Lower Purakino Catchment Group, will be held in the Fairfax Hall at 1 o'clock. And at this stage, we're proposing Chairman Hall and Councillor McDonald participate in that. The council workshop being proposed for next Thursday is changing as we speak, and I don't have the finalised details. If it's a full workshop, it will likely only be for approximately an hour, but there will be in place of it, there will be a proposed Southland Water and Land Plan Appeals Subcommittee meeting for an hour and a half that day as well. There's NZAS Community Forum being held at Ascot Park Hotel on the 10th of May at 5:30. So far I've had councillors Esler, McDonald, the Chairman and Councillor Ludlow indicate interest in attending that. There's an Environmental Challenges Hui presentation to the Waikaka Catchment Group at the Waikaka Sports Complex on the 16th of May. And at this stage we've got the Chairman, Councillor McPhail and possibly Councillor Stevens to attend that.
Clarification that TY meeting, that was me that was going to go to that.
That's right, in addition to your...
Just further on that diary, I'm about to get to requesting leave. I'm probably going to request leave for the 23rd and 24th of May, which at the moment I'm down for the Upper Catchment Group at the Riverton Senior Sits on at 6 o'clock. I may get back before the end of BOPAC, but at the stage of so a workshop session, potential workshop session, but yeah, I'll formally apply for leave on those 2 days.
And you'll note that Councillor Beard has also applied for leave for the 14th and 24th of June.
Are there any any other requests for leave or any other changes, meetings that have people have attended or likely to attend? I'm not seeing any. So on that basis, would somebody like to
Move the adoption of the schedule subject to those amendments, Chairman.
Thank you, Neville. Seconded by Lord Esler. Those in favour will say aye and raise their hand. Aye. Item 10 is the common seal. Fairly straightforward. Moved by Lloyd, seconded by Jeremy. All in favour say aye and raise your hands. Aye. Move to item 11, the 2022-23 annual plan. Would you want to comment on that, Wilma?
Yes, I would like to comment on that. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the annual plan paper was developed with information councillors and explains our current position that we are not seeking to any increase on the 5% rate increase that council has already foreshadowed in the LTP. At this stage, we don't believe that we really need to consult on this annual plan, with one exception, which is the fees and charges schedule. We're just getting some advice on whether what we foreshadowed in the LTP requires us to do an annual consultation. And we should have that information quarterly. That does not necessarily have to be part of the annual plans consultation, is my understanding. However, we're actually just going to get some clarification on that. At the time that we wrote the report, we recommended that it was just for your noting. However, councillors may want to consider in discussion today if they would like to make a decision that we retain the average 5% rates increase and control the LTP, so that it's a correction to start. And so resolution to help you with it.
Neville.
I understand, Chairman, that we made a commitment to the 5% as being the maximum that we would set for any rates increase that might be required. So it doesn't have to be as high as 5%. Still saying our commitment to that.
Point further, Jeremy?
It's, I totally agree with Councillor Cook. It's obviously up to 5%, depending on carryovers and in regards to the workloads and things, we need to, once we see the numbers and understand them, and make those calls. I certainly, this is always the time of the year that I always like to say, you can consult. It's always good to have an opportunity. Every opportunity to talk with the community is a good opportunity, whether you want to hear from the community or not. And so this is always my annual encouragement that you can still consult if need be. Often that's an opportunity for those people that want to be involved, have a bit of a say and have a yarn with the council to come and have a yarn. So I realise how the rules work though.
And I think that is a good resolution to put out there. It's being transparent. And we've got to realise that this is a tough call with inflation running at 6.9%, but this council did give a commitment that the rate rise wouldn't be over 5% this year, and that means our staff have to work innovatively and quite hard to remain in that. But as we remember last year, we had quite a controversially high. But at the time we said we would stick to our guns, and times have changed, but the commitment around the table is still the same, and I know the council are working hard to come up with numbers that will support that. So I'm certainly in favour of being transparent at this stage and putting that out to the public. But anybody else I'm missing there? Robert, you're indicating?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Regarding the 5% and the discussion around it, I'm very pleased to see this discussion being had in public and a decision made in public rather than behind the scenes, as all good council decisions should be. Thank you.
Lloyd.
Mr. Chairman, I'm more than happy to have the maximum of 5%, and if it was less than that, that would be great. But I am also aware, as I raised at the workshop, that we're talking here to retain an average of 5% rate increase. There is a third of our community that actually has crushable value reassessments each time, and that can actually throw some individual rate increases out. So we need to be clear about our communication strategy around what we've done with the general rate and how other parts of the rating system actually affects their rating bills.
Yes. Well, that's a good point, Lloyd, and the word is average, but we know that valuations and even different parts of the province can lead to aberrations. So I'm sure that will be part of our communication strategy. Anybody else wanting to comment before we?
So just on the timeframes then for being able to put together some financial information, as in the performance statement and a balance sheet, cash flow, how close or how soon might we be able to see something like that?
So the next council meeting for decisions would be, the council meeting decision to adopt the end plan is the last week of June. I can't see if time is online, but I think she will be, to advise when we think the next annual plan workshop is going to be.
Tony was online.
Tony, would you like to make a comment?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. We have some more workshops planned. As discussed yesterday, we are awaiting some feedback from our work on the climate resilience, but our workshops are planned into May, and we were expecting to take a draft to OPAC for the 24th of May, in which case we'll have the full balance sheet instead of an account.
Thank you. Thanks, Antonio. Any further comments?
So, Chair, the resolution would be. Sorry, someone having it.
Recommend that the council resolve to confirm the average 5% rates increase proposed in the 2021-31 long-term plan for the 22-23 year. So, Lyndall?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Not really a question, just a statement. Fully support our maximum of 5%, but I am conscious that actually it might be the following financial year that we really have difficulty. So I don't want to set us up for further issues by blindly sticking to our 5%, as may have happened in previous times. Thanks.
Thanks for that, Lyndall, and we know we do have other tools, including borrowing, etc., targeted rates that will be all part of that mix. That, but you make the point we have to be responsible, and I'm sure we will. So we have everybody is clear on the resolution.
Mr. Chair, so you might want to reread that. I think there was councillor views that the word maximum 5% needed to be there rather than 5%.
So is the, it's probably not controversial. So we have
amend that recommendation to show that a maximum of 5%.
Nobody's actually moved it, so it's I've just read out the proposed. So
I can second that with that wording.
Right. So Neville and Lloyd have moved that we it'll be the recommend the council resolve to confirm the maximum, or it will be a maximum 5% rates for increase proposed in the 2021 to 31 long-term plan for the 2022-23 year. We have motion's been moved and seconded. Is there any further comments or discussion? If not, I will put the resolution. All in favour will say aye and raise their hands. Aye. Aye. Against, no. Carried. Right, move to item 12, which is the release of co-investment report flood prediction scheme. Paul, would you like to speak to this item?
Tēnā koutou katoa, through you, Chair. I'll be very brief. It's report's reasonably self-explanatory. Te Uru Kahea, which was previously known as the Regional Sector Group, is a representation of regional and unitary councils. In 2019, sought additional government funding of $150 million per annum to sit alongside what unitary and regional councils already provide, around $200 million per annum of flood protection. And Te Uru Kahea have released an additional co-investment report restating, I suppose, the request for $150 million of government funding around flood protection. And the reasons for that are self-explanatory. We're experiencing these types of events across the nation regularly. Flood protection is our way of protecting communities and infrastructure, and noting that government has contributed through climate resilience projects, but this request goes a step further. So I'll leave it at that, Chair.
Well, thanks for that, Paul. And I know there's been a lot of work done by a regional sector group, including Basil Chamberlain. I think it's probably still involved. And, you know, this is just another example that if there is not some support from local government, some of this stuff just doesn't get done. And the argument is quite powerful of the cost of government buildings, infrastructure, that there is a need for a dedicated fund. And so I welcome this report, and I think it's a very good recommendation, and let's hope it falls on positively on the ears of central government. And Lloyd.
Chairman, I'm happy with what's here, and I'm happy with the movement going forward, but I just, because of where we're going as a community and the uncertainties we see around, I hope there is as much effort on the other risks to our community as what there is on flood protection. And I'm thinking of fire barriers, large areas of land being locked up. I think we need to make sure that we are, you know, if we take forestry off places, or we have fires through other sections, a flood event over the top would actually be catastrophic for our communities. So that this is bigger, I think, in my view, than just a flood protection, which is controlling water in a riverway or in a containment area. There are other unintended consequences sitting in here we need to be aware of as well. And the timber slash issues in the top of the South Island would actually demonstrate that flood protection is one thing, but when you have a whole lot of logs going down and bridges disappear and logs through houses, it's bigger than just flood protection.
And I think the conversation we have at the workshop about climate change and resilience is exactly that you can't put things in a box. You've actually got to consider the implications of everything you do. So if you put up flood banks but then plant trees in the middle of your floodway, we have to get the right tree in the right place, and it is part of that whole climate resilience conversation.
And just following up on that, Chair, I think it is pretty clear as well in this proposal that it's broader than just structural elements. It's a broader thing around how do we deal with floods in a capture process, and what the other measures you have to take. But it is a focus on climate resilience around flood control.
I don't think that.
Robert.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, just as an aside, and following up from what Councillor McLean said about unintended or unforeseen crisis situations, I think the one that we haven't taken into account up to this point is strong winds, gales, and the effects that they could have on an unprepared community. We haven't given them any much attention at all, and I just want to signal now that I believe that this is one of the major threats that we face into the future with climate change and an unsettled climate is powerful winds. And I just don't think that that's been, I haven't seen it being brought up in any forums yet. I'd just like to signal that here. Thank you.
Thanks, Robert. Any other comments on this item before we put it?
Me, Mr. Chairman, if I can.
Okay. Lyndall,
Yep,
go.
just to support the initiative. Actually, it's really good to see that the sector is getting together and proactively offering the government a way to make some things happen without looking backwards, but looking forwards. So with that, I'm happy to move the recommendation if that's what's required.
Thanks, Lyndall. Moved by Lyndall, seconded for that. Screen's better. Alan, moved and seconded. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favour of the recommendation say aye and raise your hands. Aye. Against, no. Carried. Right, item 13 is reporting of expenditure above delegated authority.
As with a number of these items you've received recently, Council has been undertaking work in the Mid-Dome Wilding Trees Program Management, and the sums involved have exceeded what's provided in the delegations manual for the Chief Executive and General Manager jointly. On this occasion, the sum was $849,500.41. The work was part of the programmed work and has been budgeted for, and much of the funding for this work comes from MUFE.
I would agree with that, Chairman. It was anticipated and budgeted for.
I can second that.
Neville, seconded by Lloyd. Any discussion? If not, I will put the recommendation. All in favour will say aye and raise your hands. Aye. Against, no. Carried. And that should take us to the end of the public session. So we probably will go offline at this stage. David, are you?
We need to do the resolution.
Oh, we're going to do the resolution first. Okay, I'll ask Jan for the reasons for going to public excluded.
Moving into public excluded to confirm the minutes of the ordinary meeting of Council held on the 9th of March 2022, and for the adoption of the committee resolutions from the Organisational Performance and Audit Committee meeting held on the 9th of March and the Strategy and Policy Committee meeting held on the 30th of March. The grounds are to prevent the disclosure or use of official information for improper gain or advantage, section 7.2J, to protect the privacy of natural persons, including that of deceased natural persons, section 7.2A.
Well, you've heard the reasons. Would somebody like to
move the excluded session, Chairman, for the reasons that have been enunciated?
Seconded by Jeremy.